I want to get into the detail of what is the carbon bubble. I worked at a large institutional investment manager in London called Henderson Global Investors, and with the more noise that we were hearing about climate change, the more investor initiatives, it seemed almost like every day a new coal company or new oil company was arriving in London to raise money. And this was in fundamental contradiction. How could it be possible to be moving towards tighter climate agreements whilst the city, the financial institutions, seem to be going in the opposite direction? And I just asked the question, and Nick asked us, we asked the question together, why not just take the world's top 200 coal, oil and gas companies, Shell and BP and Exxon, and take the reserves that they're developing and the resources which they propose to develop, and just look at the carbon dioxide that's in underground, and this will represent future emissions. And it seems such a simple question, an obvious question. I thought it must have been done before. And after 5 years of thinking along these lines, we thought, well, maybe we should do it. And so we went off and we recruited a great analyst called James Leeton to work with us, and we produced this paper, Unburnable Carbon, Are the Markets Carrying a Carbon Bubble, which coined the phrase, the carbon bubble. And I'm often asked, what is the carbon bubble? Can you just explain it in detail? And now you saw the science in the first presentation today, this remarkable story of where we go in the direction we're going in. Just to explain the concept of a carbon budget, we can only emit a certain amount of carbon dioxide before we exceed 2 degrees threshold. And people have different views as to the size of that budget. It's around 565 to around 900 gigatons of CO2. Now, if you just take the top 200 coal and gas companies and look at their reserves and the resources, it's over 1,500 gigatons. And so the 1,500 gigatons doesn't fit into the 565. That's why we called it a carbon bubble. Now, of course, not all coal, oil and gas is owned by publicly traded corporations. It's also owned by governments. So if we shared out the budget between governments and companies, actually the carbon budget for the publicly traded companies is only around 225 gigatons. So the 1,500 doesn't fit into the 225. And each year, the coal and oil industries are spending shareholder funds and finding even more. Now, I don't know if we saw a lot of figures today. The IEA, in their report last year, said that the fossil fuel industry between now and 2035 will spend $21 trillion on expanding the fossil fuel industry. Not reducing, expanding it. And we're going through a period of huge expansion in the financing of fossil fuels, going up into the Arctic and the Canadian tar sands. And there lies the contradiction. On the left, we're told Exxon's the biggest stock in the index. Shell and BP are the biggest stocks in the index. We have to hold them because we can't beat the markets. And if I was an oil company today, the biggest threat, the single threat, is if Tesla was to build a real battery manufacturing plant in China, 10 times the size of the one they're building in Nebraska, and take the oil demand out of China and put in electrics. And that would definitely kill the fossil fuel industry. And the challenge I'll leave you with is, can we as investors get ahead of the curve and make the important decisions that are crucial for the planet?